Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Patient First podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bryan Laskin, and I am so happy that you're here. And I'm very excited to have a fantastic guest on the Patient First podcast today, Eli Packouz, who is a serial inventor and two-time founder. He started his first company, Singular Sound, with his brother in 2013. They've since launched 8 blockbuster products. 2017, he partnered with Dr. Ralph Raud, Dr. Anna Markarinas to create the first device that automatically flosses all your teeth in only 10 seconds, Instafloss. After 5 years of research and development, Instafloss is ready to change the world one tooth at a time, or maybe 2 at a time if you're flossing in between teeth, right? Thank you so much for being here, Eli.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm a little bit of a serial inventor myself, mostly in the software space, primarily because coming up with physical products is hard. Like you spent 5 years in research and development, and before we hopped on, first I had a bunch of technical issues, right? Which is it's funny. We were talking a little bit too, having technical issues when you do technology. A little bit, I don't know if it's appropriate or ironic, but regardless, you did a lot of, so could you talk a little bit about the research and development that went into creating Instafloss?
Yeah, well, it's been a long journey, much longer than I ever thought it would be. I mean, you talk to to the process of software. Software, you might be able to get a V1 out earlier, but it's never done because the environment keeps on changing. With hardware, it usually takes longer to get something that's consumer ready, but hopefully when you're done, they can use it for very many years without needing to click that update button. But yeah, so the research process has been a long one. I mean, it starts with your fundamentals. Can this be physically done? Regardless of if it can be done well or if it can be done economically. So one of the first things we looked at actually was mouth guards. We're like, okay, if we put a whole mouth guard in your mouth, and then we have channels going between your teeth and funneling the water in between to get in between. Sure.
So first you're saying you're replacing, like, because nobody likes flossing. Like I don't like flossing and I'm a dentist, right?
Uh-huh.
And I have tight contacts between my teeth. So it's like snap, bam. So you're replacing floss with water.
So we are replacing current water flossing devices with a better water flossing device. Water
Okay.
flossing in many different ways can be better than strain. It can get deeper underneath the gum lines because water molecules are smaller than string molecules. It can remove more plaque. It can clean a full 360 degrees subgingival rather than just interproximal and subgingival only between the teeth. So these are things that strain can't accomplish. So you can improve your oral health in a number of ways with water flossing in a way that you can't with string flossing. So even if you don't want to replace your string, the adding of water flossing to your regimens is super beneficial in a number of ways. However, but let's back up a second. 70% of Americans regularly skip flossing, meaning that they don't floss.
And
So
another 15% say they do and they don't, probably is my guess.
and then the 15% after that actually floss, but flossing correctly. Right. So I mean, I've read a lot of you get very different results from studies published on flossing. And if you look at them a little closely and you start categorizing them into two groups, broadly speaking, there's a lot of ways you can differentiate them. But if you look at the ones where dentists floss their patients and the ones where patients floss themselves, the ones where patients floss themselves is almost no different from the group where patients don't floss. And then the group where patients are flossed by dentists, you see a night and day difference. So it's not just a matter of flossing yes or no, but it's if you floss, are you doing it correctly? And so we were trying to solve two problems with Instafloss. The first was that 70% of people don't floss. And then the second is that everybody else, to a very small margin of error, is not flossing correctly. Something that is 100% efficacious done 0 times is 0% effective. So you need to actually do it right, even if it is 100% efficacious to get any sort of efficacy. So that has been the driving need of why we knew we had to create something.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're not going to find anybody, I don't think, that was going to say, boy, that we've really licked this flossing thing, right? I mean, I remember a few years ago, I was actually on a couple news networks because there was a study that came out that said you didn't have to floss.
Uh,
And it wasn't even a study that came out and said you didn't have to floss. It basically was referencing something about flossing done incorrectly, like you were saying, right? And but because just the hope, the hope that you didn't have to floss made it a national news story, right? And so this is sorely needed. I remember a mentor dentist of mine saying he doesn't. We've tried to beat into patients' head to floss
mm,
for since the first dentist became a dentist, right?
mhm.
Pretty much, and we are just not effective in that. We can't. It's so hard to change people's behavior like that. So I think having, you know, for the other, what can't remember the math, but the other 90% of patients, right, that having something that works well is vastly important. And so now we've recognized, okay, having something that's easier to do and effective that
Mhm.
can replace floss or floss water flossers was your goal. So how did you go about achieving the goal that became InstaFloss?
Right. So the first fundamental was, okay, we're going to use water to do this instead of string for a number of reasons. One of the top complaints is that it's uncomfortable. Water is far more comfortable, and you could adjust the pressure depending on your gum health. It can get deeper into the gums. It can clean more areas that string can't, and we can actually do it automatically. Like building a device to automatically string floss you is going to be impossible and not even as beneficial as if we could create something to automatically water floss you. So the first thing we looked at was mouth guards, and we wanted channels to go in between each teeth, but then each tooth, well, each set of teeth. So, but we realized there were two issues with this. Number one, because everybody's mouth is different, you would have to create a custom mouth guard for each individual, which is going to be stupidly expensive. You can't mass manufacture it. And if people can't afford it, you're not going to solve the problem for very many people. And number two, even if people could afford it, it would only clean interproximally, it would only clean between the teeth. Whereas one of the advantages of water floss is that you can clean underneath the gums a full 360 degrees around each tooth. And so it's like we're going to use water because it can clean 360 and then get rid of that advantage. So we knew we needed a solution that can actually go across the whole tooth. So what we ended up coming up with was an H-shaped device. So one of the main issues with water flossing is that you have to aim it manually. You're going to miss areas. It's most effective at a 90-degree angle because it ricochets perpendicular to get underneath the gums. And you have to do it on both sides. And if you try to get it 90 degrees on the inside, it's just never going to work. So with our H-shaped device, you just put it in. Uh, uh, some people may be listening to this, so I'm not going to be able to talk in just a second. But you put it in, uh, obviously, I didn't attach it to the water base, but the jets come from both sides on all four quadrants, and that way we can get 90 degrees on all sides and have 100% coverage of the mouth. So there's no need to aim. You don't have to do it correctly. You can have motor function impairments or disabilities, and you can achieve a 100% covered floss at the correct angle.
So you just went over a few things, and I want to describe a little bit about the device for those because you're right. A lot of people do listen to the podcast. So it's an H-shaped device where the sort of the prongs, upper prongs and lower prongs go between put it between the
The
teeth.
teeth go in
Uh,
between the upper prong, the top teeth go in between the upper prongs of the H, and the bottom teeth go in between the lower prongs of the H. And in the middle is a swivel joint.
yeah, a swivel joint. So as you move it around your arch, it actually swivels, which is very cool. And by the way, you're not saving one tooth at a time or even two teeth at a time. You're doing four teeth at a time, right? Because you're flossing between two teeth on upper and lower. So you should see it saving four teeth at a time, right? Well, but also, you also hit on a huge point, which there's so many people who have difficulty even brushing their teeth. You know, people in nursing homes and who have, or people that have dexterity issues, right?
Mhm.
So, like string floss is completely out of the question, right?
Right, absolutely.
And having this sort of like 360 water for those patients alone could be transformative, right? And so, but also, I mean, so it's that's very cool. So kudos to you on the solution you came up with. I think it's really interesting.
Thank you. I mean, I can't take full credit. It's definitely a team effort. Every little step of the way was, somebody's idea, of where to put the swivel joint, understanding how far apart the jets needed to be was its own long, laborious scientific process involving many cadavers, actually. Uh, and experimenting on them and using like plaque disclosing liquid to see if the jets were X far apart, could we still cover 100% of the gum line, etc. And then, when you move from that initial engineering of, okay, how far away do the jets have to be? How big does the mouthpiece have to be? How wide can people open their jaws? Because obviously, if you can't fit it in your mouth, or only big people can use it, we're not really accomplishing a lot. And then, we had to move and say, okay, now let's experiment in real life. And before experimenting with real life, actually, I experimented with it on myself, and it felt so nice that I was doing it for like many minutes at a time. And this is kind of a problem because every 10 seconds is the equivalent of a 2-minute floss. So if you're doing it for say 2 minutes, that's 120 seconds, which is the equivalent of 24 minutes flossing every time. So do that a couple times a day. That's not good for you. Most people have the problem of underflossing. I was in the very rare position of being in a group of overflossing. And after like a few days to a week of doing that, I started breaking out in sores all over my gums and between my teeth and my throat. I couldn't swallow water because it was so painful. I went to the dentist and he's like, okay, you have ANOG, which is trench mouth. People get this in World War One for
Yeah.
because their gums were deteriorating. So I'm going to give you antibacterials, antifungals, antivirals, just any domain of life. We're going to kill. Um, and as I recovered from that, and so I realized that okay, you can make flossing feel too good if you don't stop people from overdoing it. So one of the things that we discovered in that stage was every time you accomplish a 10-second floss, the device turns off and like little light flashes, so you're done, right? And that was something I never expected to be part of the product, right? I never thought that we would have to design something in the product to discourage people from
Mhm.
flossing. Um, but as I was using it myself, I realized that was just as necessary as the part where we encourage people to floss.
What are the results that you're getting now with
So
InstaFloss?
the results we were getting is we compared it to the methods we were doing is we had people not floss, string floss, use a leading brand water flosser, and use Instafloss. And we first had them all in the no floss group to induce gingivitis, which is pretty typical of this, and it's very easily reversed. So then we had them in those four groups, and that way we're able to compare changes over time, because you don't want people's previous habits influencing your data, right? That's why you have to get them to the no flossing group first. So then in this, we saw obviously the worst results in the no flossing. We saw the second worst results in the string flossing, the third worst results with the leading brand manual water flosser, and Instafloss actually was better than all of the other three categories. What we were measuring was gum inflammation and reducing the inflammation in periodontal pocket size. And we were about 20% more effective overall. So if you're measuring overall pocket size reduction, on average, we were 20% better than the leading brand manual water flosser. However, if you looked a little bit closer, we realized that the inside of the mouth the part facing the tongue, those gums, the pockets were reducing by significantly more. So it was like 30, 35%. And so my theory on the mechanism of why we're performing better than the manual water flosser, because in theory, we should have the same results, right? Because each individual jet from an Instafloss is the same jet as a manual water flosser. So if you use an Instafloss, in theory, it should be equivalent. But we saw better results, especially on the inside. And so what that seems to tell us is that yes, you will get these results with a manual water flosser if you do it correctly. If you don't miss any areas and you hold it at 90 degrees, but nobody does it correctly, and people especially don't do it correctly and hold it at the right area and actually aim towards the gum line, etc. On the inside of the mouth, because that's much more difficult. So therefore, seeing the disparity between the front and the back sides of the gums of the teeth really was an indication to me that that Instafloss is as if you're using a manual water flosser perfectly, which is what we were attempting to accomplish, which was to reduce the user error.
So it's similar to having a manual toothbrush versus an electric toothbrush, right? Electric toothbrush, you kind of have to get it in the area and it does the work. You can do the same thing with a manual toothbrush, right? But nobody does, myself
Exactly.
included, right? Interesting. That's very cool. So tell me a little bit because you showed the handpiece with the H nozzle and the rotating, the rotating base. What does the water receptacle look like? Is it
Oh,
basically like a little tank, like a traditional water flosser?
it's similar to a traditional water flosser, in my opinion, more beautiful. But
Unbiased, of course. Oh, maybe
I'm
biased.
very, very biased. I will disclose my conflicts of interest here. But but essentially, you have a base and you have a little tank that goes on top. Now, this is our first version of the device is desktop. We will be coming out with a portable version in the future. However, we have not released the schematics for that yet.
Sure. So do you have anybody that puts any like medicaments inside with the water, or is that not recommended?
So we are developing a concentrate mouthwash fluid, and we actually have on our timeline to include a whitening fluid. So one of the most expensive parts for consumers, as well as the most, when you add cost, you also add like, things such as like carbon imprint impact, like is the water inside mouthwash. That is actually the most expensive part of the mouthwash, not because water is expensive, but moving water around is expensive. That is an intensive process. So it could cost more in the to store it because you're taking up more room in the shipping facility or the storage facility, taking up more room on the truck, on the boat, etc. So with InstaFloss, because people are using water already inside the tank, we figured we can, sort of circumvent the whole need to ship mouthwash with water. So right now we're still in development of the mouthwash because obviously first we have to get the InstaFloss to work. It's been a 5-year process to get it to work. So we know we weren't even going to touch the mouthwash development until the device was working properly and we did all our tests on it, etc. Because if we had to change something on the InstaFloss, then all that research we did on the mouthwash might go out the window too. So
Mhm.
now that the InstaFloss is ready for the market, now we're in the process of doing the research on the concentrate mouthwash. And so we're looking at a few different solutions because obviously we don't want to gunk up the machine. But we know that there are solutions that we can concentrate, you could dash in and then save even more time, save expense, save the environment while you're at it.
That's cool. That's really neat. So how long has Instafloss been available?
So it is not yet available.
Ooh,
Yeah, no,
special sneak peek here
special
on the
sneak
Patient
peek. It's
First
been in development
podcast.
for 5 years. But
Yeah,
right now, what we're doing is I'm taking trips to the factory. We're manufacturing in Guadalajara, Mexico. So we're North American made. And we're doing QC testing on the device, which means we are getting parts off of the molds and then we're running them hundreds and hundreds of times until they break, and then seeing where they break, and then reinforcing that, because that is something that you have to do with manufactured um, molded parts rather than things that you CNC or things that you print, etc., that are not from the manufacturing process. And part of this is being able to set a warranty. We want a long warranty, and we want to make sure that the device outlasts that warranty. And that's some testing you can't done until you're post manufacturing. So right now we have built the molds. Things are coming off the molds in the factory. We're running them to the ground, making slight modifications, etc. And we anticipate Instafloss to be ready for the consumer in Q2 2023.
Oh, so very soon it will be available. Is there a place where people can get on a waiting list or learn more about InstaFloss?
Absolutely, you can join about 45,000 other people and go to instafloss.com, and we'll notify you when it's available.
It's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Eli. It's been great to meet you, and congrats on your launch of your eighth product. It's amazing, and I look forward to watching it grow and seeing all the cool things that you have going on at InstaFloss.
Thank you, and we can't wait to floss your teeth. It's the world's quickest floss. It's taken the longest time to develop, but I'm glad that we're right there.
I would bet that other flossers have been in development just as long. They just only are flossing two teeth at a time, not four.
We'll see. We'll see.